Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. Guys, I'm a mom now, and I've actually been a mom now for almost 9 months, and I'm here to tell you my birth story finally. So I've actually posted a couple of videos that I pre-recorded before I actually gave birth, and I never had a chance to post those before the baby came. And then after, obviously, I've just been adjusting to being a mom, trying to maintain my main channel and do all of the things. So it's taken me a while to share my birth story with you. And my birth story, as you can tell from the title, is a little unique, as they all are, because yes, I was planning to have a home birth. So I even have a video that I was planning to post about my home birth kit that I never had a chance to post. And I'm not sure if I will, since I never ended up having a home birth. But if you guys are interested to see what a home birth kit looks like, let me know in the comments and I will post that video so you guys can see what a home birth supply kit looks like. Anyways though, before we get into the birth story, I do just want to leave a little disclaimer that if you are a new mom watching birth videos, getting prepared for your birth experience, take everything that I say with a grain of salt, because as you can see by the title of the video, my birth plan completely went out the window and everything was completely different than what I had planned. And if you watch any other videos like this of other people sharing their birth story, you will also see how unique everyone's story is. So if you watch my video or anybody else's video, you will see that all of the experiences are going to be so unique. So take my experience with a grain of salt, because it's very likely that your birth experience will be nothing like mine or 5 other videos that you watch, because it's going to be so unique to you, your baby, and your wishes, and then just what nature ends up happening. So let's just go ahead and get right into it, because it is a long story. I ended up being in labor for about close to 48 hours, so there's a lot to go through. So when I chose to have a home birth, I actually chose around 20-ish, 21 weeks. Before then, I was seeing an OB, but then around 22 weeks, I decided that I wanted to have a home birth. So I did a bunch of research, found someone in my area, and she was still about an hour north of me, so she wasn't very close. But if I was gonna have a home birth, I wanted to get exactly what I was looking for, someone with my same beliefs, my same style, someone that was very conservative in the fact of if something was going wrong, that she would be able to guide me the right way. So I found my midwife, and she was excellent, and throughout that time I actually had a midwife and a student midwife, which was a really good experience because I felt like I had a lot of attention as far as my birth goes, because I had someone that was a certified midwife also teaching another midwife. So I felt like it was always a learning experience for the student midwife, so I felt like I got a lot of care and attention in my birth. And we'll start with October 11th, which was a Wednesday. So like I said, we're going way back, guys, because I've been a mom now for almost 9 months. So Wednesday, October 11th, I felt very normal. And why I say I felt very normal is I even went to a girls' night at Melting Pot with my best friend and my sister. So I felt very normal going into labor. Now I was almost 41 weeks, a couple of days shy of 41 weeks. So I knew that at any moment in time that I was going to have a baby at that point. But just a couple hours later, throughout the night after my girls' night, going into Thursday, October 12th, throughout the night, I started getting some cramping. It was nothing crazy, nothing like active labor. It was just mild cramping. It was more so uncomfortable than anything. And they were just kind of lingering here and there, nothing consistent, didn't have a real pattern, and really wasn't that intense. Now, around 10 p.m. on October 12th, that Thursday, they started to get a little bit of a pattern. So it was every 10 minutes for about 30 seconds, not intense, but we're starting to have a pattern. So obviously I was in labor at that point. So that was Thursday. That happened throughout that day. Now Thursday going into Friday, so in the middle of the night to October 13th, through that night, they got way more intense with the same pattern of 10 minutes, but instead of like 30 seconds, they were now prolonging to about 40 seconds. So still not super close together, but they were intensifying a lot, and I was really uncomfortable throughout the night. I remember I would hop in the shower just to try to get some relief because the heat. I was doing anything that I could to just feel a little bit better, but by no means was it outrageous. It was just uncomfortable and getting more intense. So Friday morning around 10 a.m., my midwife and the student midwife came to check me, and lo and behold, I was 4 centimeters dilated at that point. So in fact, my contractions throughout the night were definitely intense because I was actually progressing. So 4 centimeters was good. I felt like I was doing good at that point because, like I said, it wasn't outrageous, it was intense, but I definitely felt like if I got to at least 4 centimeters here, I could endure a little bit longer. So with being a first-time mom and having a home birth, one of the biggest things that they tell you to avoid having to have a hospital birth, basically a failed home birth, is because first-time moms get really exhausted because they get really excited and anxious that they're going to be having a baby soon and they don't rest. So I wanted to make sure that I could rest through that, but I could only rest as much as my body was letting me due to the contractions getting more intense. I definitely did not go out and leave my house and do anything. I was here, I was resting, but it was just getting more intense. So I technically wasn't like closing my eyes and going to sleep, but I was in fact resting. So then around 2 p.m. still on that Friday, October 13th, I started to have more heavily steady contractions. They were about 6 to 7 minutes apart, but they were getting a lot more intense. So I felt like I was progressing more. So I texted my doula because I was also required to have a doula. A doula is basically your birthing coach to help you get through the pain and deal with that, while the midwives focus on the actual baby and more like medical part of it. So my doula was scheduled to come around 11 p.m. that night because we knew that I had some time left based on my pattern of contractions. So I wasn't at the 5-minute mark yet, but we figured by 11 o'clock, which would have been, 3 hours since I texted her, that I would be at the 5-minute mark and I would be way closer to actually giving birth. So she arrived at 11 and my doula got there before the midwives, which was completely normal. That's actually how they wanted it. They wanted my doula to be doing all of the beginning care of me and getting me through all the contractions, and then them come in later in the stage to actually help with more of the medical part, like I said. So around 1 to 2 a.m., which would technically now be Saturday, October 14th, is when my midwives and the student midwife came in to my home around like 1 to 2 a.m. And at that point, I was almost 6 centimeters. So between 10 a.m. on Friday and then Saturday at 2 a.m., I had progressed about 2 centimeters. So we felt like I was doing pretty well, but I was really uncomfortable at that point. I could not deal with the contraction when I was sideways on the bed. So I dealt with contractions way better if I was even just standing up or even on my back or sitting up like this. But if I was laying sideways, it was so brutally painful and my hips were hurting so bad. So we were navigating that and figuring it out, but I just remember how bad the contractions felt when I was laying sideways, and then as soon as I decided like I need to sit up, then the contractions were so much better. So I don't know why, but when I was on my side, the contractions were really, really painful. So my midwives kind of were just starting to set up things. Like I said, it was close to about like 1 to 2 a.m. when they even got there. So while they were getting everything set up, checking me, all of those things, it reached to about 4 a.m. when they were about to start setting up the actual like water pool that I was going to be having the baby in. And they wanted to just check on the baby at that point with a like fetal monitor. And at the time they thought that the baby had a heart murmur. So my midwife, like I said, errs on the side of caution. She's very conservative in the fact of if your baby is going to have a medical emergency, or if you are, we do not wait it out. We go right to the hospital, which is like why I said I aligned with her beliefs on that. I didn't want anyone that didn't play it safe and just would be reckless and careless with the process. So I was very grateful that her alarm in her head started going off though when she thought the baby had a heart murmur. So I, of course, was really bummed at that point and obviously in a lot of pain. I had been in labor for a very long time at that point. I got to 6 centimeters and I felt like we were so close to the home stretch. They were literally going to get everything set up and they thought the baby had a heart murmur. So at that point, we had to make the call that we were going to go to the hospital. So we quickly gathered things. I obviously had nothing prepared. I didn't have a hospital bag because I didn't plan to go to the hospital. Next time, if I ever plan to have another home birth, I will definitely just have the worst case scenario planned, and that would be a hospital bag. So I didn't have anything like that. I grabbed anything that I could, and literally it was diapers and I think like an outfit that I at least wanted him to wear, but I didn't even care at that point. Obviously, I was in a completely different space at that point. It was just I wanted to have the baby, and I also wanted the baby to be safe. We ended up going to a different hospital than the original hospital that we had planned to go to, because the hospital that we ended up going to has better care for babies, if that makes sense. Like, they have a whole like NICU unit that is just more specialty care for babies. So since I wasn't having a medical emergency and they thought that the baby was, we went to that hospital, because if I went to the other hospital, they likely would have transferred the baby to the other hospital that we went to. Anyways, we got to the hospital and it was close to around 5 a.m. at that point, but while we were on the way, my midwife drove separately, and then the student midwife went in my vehicle where Mike was driving. So while we were on the way though, my midwife called the hospital, explained everything, where I was at that point. So when I went through the emergency room, obviously at that point, because it was in the middle of the night, like the regular hospital isn't open, we went right to the OB triage, and they were already prepared for us since my midwife called, which was really convenient because I was in a lot of pain at that point because I was in pretty active labor. So we were able to get me right into my room, which I was really grateful for. And my experience at the hospital at that point was really good. They left me alone a bit, I will say. I know that's weird, but they were kind of hands off because obviously I went to having a home birth to then a hospital birth. So they knew that I really wanted to do a lot of things naturally. So I even asked them if they would give me like the Unported like belly fetal monitor. So they did. It's like a Bluetooth monitor, so I'm not strapped to all of the wires, so that I could still move around, because I know that was best for me. Obviously, because when I was just laying in my bed and I was sideways, I was having really painful contractions. So I was so grateful that I was able to be out of the bed, and I was just moving and grooving for so long. And also to confirm, the baby did not have a heart murmur, thank God. So I was completely happy with that. I was like, okay, at least we went here. If he did have a heart murmur, I would be glad I'm here. But ultimately, I was glad that he didn't have a heart murmur. So everything at that point was honestly fine. We technically didn't even need to go to the hospital. So my midwife for a second even thought about like unadmitting me to the hospital, but we didn't want to do that because even on my ride over to the hospital, I dilated an additional centimeter. So I was 7 centimeters when I was at the hospital, and we didn't want to risk leaving and either stopping my labor or having a baby in the car. And I was already admitted and everything like that. They already had me strapped up and everything with everything. I had signed all my documents. So we were just like, let's just have the baby here and do it as natural as we can. So once everything got kind of like settled down, as far as like I said, hooking me up to everything, checking on the baby, signing my paperwork, all the nurses and doctors in and out, and then them finally just leaving me to let me labor on my own for a bit. It was around like 6:30, almost 7 o'clock in the morning. Keep in mind, my water still was not broken yet. Fun fact, within my pregnancy, I actually took a supplement. It's like a vitamin to make my water sac stronger, so that when I did give birth at home, that my water sac wouldn't break. Basically, I didn't want my water to break too early on in my water birth, because my midwives actually would prefer if the baby was born with their water sac intact. So it kind of explained why my water hadn't broken yet at that point, and I was 7 centimeters and actively still contracting. I was actually like triple contracting all at once. So at one point it got super severe and we weren't making major progress, so they ended up having to break my water, which was very painful. Once that happened, I was having a lot more intense contractions, and we got to 9 centimeters, where obviously I was almost go time to start pushing and having the baby. And they were kind of all getting prepared for that, and then still nothing was really happening. Nothing was happening. So they were like, okay, we should probably try to figure out what's going on. They rechecked me and they realized that my cervix had started to swell, and at that point I was in labor for like close to 40 hours at that point, maybe like 35, but between there. Since I was awake for so long, I was obviously getting tired, the baby was getting tired. They had advised that I needed to have an epidural so that my body could relax and the swelling could go down, and that I can continue to have a natural birth. So at that time, after laboring for so long, I ended up getting an epidural, which I will tell you, after I got my epidural, I felt like I was on cloud 9 because I was so exhausted. But with that, what happened was my body was tired, and like the doctor said, my body needed to rest, and it really did. I instantly fell asleep for 4 hours. And everything stopped basically because I was asleep and my body just wanted to rest. The baby wanted to rest. I did have a nurse who was flipping me from side to side and using the peanut ball, but for 4 hours I was just asleep, Truthfully, I know that's the weirdest thing, that in labor, and very active labor, I was asleep. So when I woke up around 11 p.m. and they checked me, I still didn't progress from that 7 centimeters. So me sleeping for 4 hours is what they thought would make my body relax and the swelling go down, but it didn't. So at that point we had to make some decisions, unfortunately, and the next one would be Pitocin, which for me, I did not want to do Pitocin at all. But at the time, the doctor advised me that that would be my last ditch effort to have a natural birth. So we did a very small amount of Pitocin just to see how the baby was even going to react. And the baby reacted very negatively and his heart rate instantly dropped. And at that point, then it became kind of like an emergency C-section. It was like, there's no other option. You need to go into a C-section now. So within 10 minutes, I was in the operating room and having a C-section. My C-section was really painful. At one point, I was telling the anesthesiologist that I could feel what was happening. So they were giving me more medication. The more medication that they gave me, though, I started to have really bad chills. I was freezing cold. So they wrapped up my whole head and my arms and chest with blankets. They even put almost like it was like a blow dryer type of situation under my blankets to warm me up, because the medication was kind of like shocking my body a bit and I was freezing. So they were warming me up that way. So the C-section ended up being not a really great experience either, but the baby was born at 11:15. So it was a very short window of when they were telling me that we needed to go into basically an emergency C-section to have the baby, to then him being birthed only 15 minutes later at 11:15. He was born 7 pounds, 13 ounces, and he had a ton of hair. And he had great lungs on him, like he was hollering the moment that he came out. So he was all in all very healthy. He didn't need to leave the room or anything like that. They figured that maybe there was going to be some complications on the way out. He might have needed extra oxygen, but no, he needed nothing. So I was happy about that. And at that point, it didn't matter all of what I went through the last 48 hours, because I labored for like 44 hours at that point. And obviously it all goes away and you have your baby, and he was perfectly healthy. After my C-section, they brought me into the post-op area where I had obviously just was given a lot of anesthesia. So I was very tired still, but I was able to hold the baby right then and there. I don't really remember too much of that because I really was so sleepy from the medication, and obviously being awake for like 40-50 hours at that point. So I was very tired. But my sister came in and saw the baby, and I didn't really even hardly remember her being there, but we got moved to a room, and our first night was great. I felt like I had the best night's sleep ever because I obviously had a lot of medication still, anesthesia that was still in my body, and I was exhausted, but I slept. The baby did great. It was peaceful, and everything was good. For the first days, I had to stay there. When you have a C-section, you have to stay there for 48 hours because they just want to make sure everything's okay. On the last day there, my blood pressure started to get kind of high, which I know was concerning the doctors a bit, but on the end of my pregnancy, my blood pressure actually started to get a little bit high, but I ended up swimming every single day. Very good cardio is swimming, and was able to regulate my blood pressure back down to normal. So interestingly enough, on my last day at the hospital when we were trying to go home, my blood pressure started to get really high again. So they kept monitoring it, but they figured that it was just, you know, obviously from all the events that just happened. They sent me home, and then just a day later, my midwife came over to do my like postpartum check, and at that point my blood pressure was really high. So again, she is very much errs on the side of caution, so she sent me back to the hospital, where then I was not fully admitted because they were able to give me some medication that worked to lower my blood pressure, but then I went on medication. So I was then recovering from my C-section, and I was on my blood pressure medicine, trying to make sure that my blood pressure wasn't getting high throughout, because that can be really dangerous. But all in all, the C-section was a hard recovery, harder than I imagined it to be, while also taking care of the baby. So yeah, that's my birth story. I could go a little bit deeper into another video on my postpartum and what I did for my postpartum, because I actually had a really good postpartum aside from recovering from a C-section. But yeah, that's my birth story. It's completely different and unplanned the way that I wanted it to be, but that's just birth for you. So it is what it is, and I'm just happy that I was able to have a healthy baby, and here we are 9 months later doing the whole mom thing. If you guys are interested in seeing what a home birth kit looks like or hearing my postpartum, let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.